Hi everyone, my name is Enrique and yes, I know, I haven't made videos for a long time and there's a lot of things that happened in my life. I had a new job, I had to pay a lot of bills, my computer crashed, my Premiere stopped working. I'm working in another system, so hopefully that one will be as good or maybe a little bit more good than Premiere. There's a lot of things that happened in my life that, trust me, it took away all the time that I had to make videos, and plus I need to get paid, and since I don't make videos on YouTube now, or I never make videos on YouTube, I have to do this as a hobby. So why am I doing this video? Is it to stay my life as it now? Not exactly. It's to just say my opinions on a show that was revived a few days ago. So what's the show that made me do this video? Simple enough. X-Men 97. Now before I get my thoughts into the show itself, I need to talk about the original run that it was in Fox Kids, which was the original X-Men animated series. In 1997, the show ended after a long time, after 5 seasons, and it ended with the episode Graduation Day. And it had a lot of characters that were reunited when Charles Xavier was dying. But don't worry, he was taken away by aliens. In fact, one of the aliens was called Elandra from the Shi'ar. It's a long story there. But more importantly, it marked the end of the animated show for a long time, for a few decades to say the least. And now, what made the show revive? Well, Disney, money, and Marvel's success, obviously. But let's talk about what made the show return to its glory and what made them so good and what were the reactions of people. That's what I'm talking about. So what's the plot of this show itself? Well, in the first 2 episodes, it was clearly established that it happened at the very least 1 year since Charles Xavier was killed. Or at least that's what the world seemed to think. After all, we saw the last episode, but everyone in the world thinks that Charles Xavier passed away. So it made the X-Men be more active. In fact, it made Cyclops be more active as he tries to make more relations with the human government and try to figure out what's going on now that Xavier is gone. And now there are a lot of villains that come up, and especially the Sentinels. But there was more to meet the eye. And of course, it also brings the plot of Magneto coming to the team and actually become essentially the leader according to Charles' will in this kind of thing. To top it all off, Jean Grey is pregnant and now it's up to Cyclops and the X-Men to figure out who is the threat, why the Sentinels came back, and who's behind of all the attacks, especially when Magneto has become the new leader of the X-Men. That pretty much covers it up, but needless to say, the story is intriguing and it's more serialized than it was before, probably. It was more standalone episode-ish, but it had continuations, of course. But ever since season 2, they have more standalone episodes with season arcs and sagas like the Phoenix Saga, and there was a lot going on. But in here, it establishes something that we already knew before, but embracing something new, creating new stories, and seeing more character dynamics. Then, speaking of which, let's talk about characters. So, needless to say, the original characters came back, with some new voiceover actors, of course. Some of the originals from the voices of Wolverine, Storm, Rogue, Beast, and Mr. Sinister come back. Now, Mr. Sinister is not in this episodes, but it's clearly that he is going to return, especially when it's going to come up in later episodes, so stay tuned. But needless to say, let's talk about the characters that, in my opinion, have the most impact on this show. Let's talk about first, Magneto. Now, ever since Magneto helped Charles Xavier to send a signal to the Elandra in order to heal him and take him away from Earth, Magneto went into a different path. We all know him as the villain who wants to become the leader of the mutants and destroy all humankind. But in this show, it goes in a different spin. You see, Magneto now, not only is he part of the X-Men, but he relentlessly show to be the leader of the X-Men, according, like I said, to Charles Will. Now, we don't know if that's true or not, or if he is convoluting something sinister, you know? You see what I did there? But let's just say that seeing Magneto in a different light is actually pretty interesting. It makes the character more multi-dimensional, and it makes him see like he actually cares about following his friend's dream and possibly become something even better, which is something that is precedented into the comics. However, one cannot help to think that maybe that's not exactly true, or maybe it's all a ruse. You obviously know that when Magneto joins the X-Men, you see them be a little suspicious, and all us the audience want to be on his side because he's a good guy. We know that he can be good, he's a sympathetic villain, but what makes him think to join the X-Men now and not before, like maybe after the show ended? And remember, this happened 1 year after Charles died, and Magneto is now joining the team and not before? What made him change his mind? That's very weird. Speaking of weird, he also seems to have a new relationship for Rogue, since according to the show, she now can touch Magneto without absorbing his powers or depowering him or make him weak, which is something that we never saw before. Or at the very least, we probably saw in comics, but not many people know about. So, and don't forget, the movies established, the ones for Bryan Singer, that he could be absorbed from powers from Rogue. Like Magneto could even touch Rogue, but he'd get his powers taken. Don't forget that. That happened. But in this show, it establishes that, yeah, he can touch Rogue and is going to create a kind of a romance, which I'm sure a lot of people will be upset about, but needless to say, we have to see how it turns out and how Gambit is going to react to all of this, since he got screwed over a little bit on these episodes, but hopefully it will make him realize what he has to do and make him grow a little bit as a character. Let's talk about another character who was also established in the show and had a lot of episodes focused on her, but never got an actual arc, and that is of course talking about Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. Now, aside from the fact that she has a mohawk now, which is pretty cool, it's important to establish that she probably didn't have much arcs, except, you know, from being the second in command of the X-Men and having a second son, or being the second mother to a kid called Manjari. I saw the episode, so I know the names, and not much anything else. But I tried to remember a lot of things. There was an episode and she was the queen, but she rejected that. But more importantly, in this show, it establishes what she would think if she became a human. Now, this is not new for us, the comic book fans, since we saw Aurora Monroe being taken away from her powers and having to figure out what to do in order to get them back. And this show established that. One of the characters from this show, the Executioner, kind of like a Deadpool, Deathstroke kind of character, but, you know, being a mutant hater, who is also part of the Friends of Humanity, the villains on the past few seasons, becoming one of this kind of assassin kind of looking guy who uses the powers of the colored dampeners in order to establish like a super weapon that can take away the mutant powers from any mutant. And they do that to Storm, since she was trying to save Magneto from a bullet. And after that, she becomes depowered. And of course, it causes her to lose grip of who she is. And now she's questioning what's she going to do, leaving the X-Men behind. That is going to make a lot of people question What is Aurora Monroe going to do without her powers? Who is she without being a mutant? Who is Aurora without Storm? And that's what the show is going to establish. How is she going to become Storm again, but this time in a different way? Now, if you read the comics, you know that she has to go away, find someone called Forge, which is also part of the X-Men stories, and is going to help her probably to find a new way to become Storm again. And that's something I want to see, and hopefully it will make her realize what makes her special. So that should be interesting to see. But now let's get to the nitty-gritty and talk about the two most important characters that, in my opinion, make this show a success. And that is, of course, Cyclops and Jean Grey, played by Ray Chase and Jennifer Hale. Now, it's important to establish something. Norm Spencer, the original voice of Cyclops, passed away in 2020. And the actress Catherine Disher did not return for this role of Jean Grey into this new show. I assume because she doesn't have the acting chops from her voice to do the voice of Jean anymore, and because she will think that she still sounds old. But regardless of the ideas, or regardless of why she didn't return, it's important to establish Cyclops and Jean Grey are my favorite characters. I don't care if many people consider them boring or not interesting or any sort of thing. They are, in my opinion, the characters that could still live up to Charles Xavier's dream, but do something different and new. And let's be honest, Cyclops and Jean Grey got screwed over and over again, not just in the movies, but in other forms of media, because they need to put the focus on Wolverine for whatever reason, despite the fact that Wolverine might be a cool character, but is not the only cool character and not the only one that can go through a character arc. I mean, we saw a lot of episodes with Wolverine in the past being the main character, whether it was his story or whether it was in another story. But the important thing to establish here is that in this episode, or in these two episodes that we saw the development of Cyclops as a leader. People forget that he was one of the leaders and the one who could live up to Charles Xavier's dreams, but also act a little bit more like Magneto and being on the front lines. A lot of people have said in multiple videos that Cyclops, if there is one thing about Cyclops, is that he's both the balance between Charles and Eric Lensher. Now, a lot of people say that this show makes Cyclops look cool, but to those people I say he was always cool. He was always that great of a character. It's just that we never saw him in too many episodes, and like I said, the movies screw him up very royally because they didn't care about the character or what his motivations were. I know it's a joke to say it only cares about Jean Grey, but that's superficial to think that. Don't get me wrong, they are good as a couple. That's why I love them as together, because they both have a history, they understand each other, and like I said multiple times in the past, especially in the video that I made that prediction about, what would happen in this new show, that yeah, Cyclops and Jean Grey are not only powerful, but they also work as one. And remember, they have a huge long history. But pointing aside from the history in comic books or how they screwed them up in the movies, let's talk about what makes this Cyclops even more special now than it was before. It's because it's establishing the responsibility of being a leader. Remember, he was always the leader and he was in charge of leading the X-Men. But what happens when Charles Xavier is gone? And now that Jean is pregnant with a baby, what do you think is his role now? What is Cyclops? Who is he inside? Is he the leader? Or is he a father? Is he going to be the kind of leader that the X-Men need? Was he going to leave someone aside to take over and become a father to this new baby, Nathan? And if you know who he is, you know his history. And speaking of which, let's talk about Jean Grey. Now in the show, seeing her pregnant, seeing going through the emotions of being a mother, it's important to see, and it's something that we wanted to see out of Jean. Who is she now that she's a mother? And how is she going to explain how to be a mutant to her son? But more importantly, something else happens, and it happens in the second episode. And that is, of course, that there is another Jean Grey. And yes, there are two Jean Greys. If you know the history in the comics, you know what this could possibly mean. And if you saw the toys advertisement, you know there is a little bit of a spoiler there. But regardless of that, regardless of any of those things, it's good to see new character development for both of the characters. And more importantly, it's cool to see Cyclops doing more badass things that they didn't do in this show before. He didn't do badass things, but it was more about leading and about fighting Sinister. But in this, he actually has more combat skills and a lot more development, and for God's sakes, he lands on the ground from the air using his beams. That is amazing. That is one level of badassery more that surpasses Captain America or any other hero that I've seen. Hell, probably even more so from Spider-Man. And I love Spider-Man, but I love Cyclops too. And to me, when he landed and said, "To me, my X-Men," that's just rich. That's just beautiful. You have no idea how gratifying it is to see that, especially when you are a Cyclops fan like me as myself. Let's now talk about the animation. It's obvious that it's trying to capture the original run, but also giving something new, and dare I say, it's a lot cooler than I thought. I mean, I was worried about the animation trying to be like the old times, with the Yankee, animation and a lot of things that throw at you at the same time, but you trying to notice every little detail. That's one of the beauties about these X-Men shows, is that you can notice something on the background, but still gain something different, something interesting. And that's something that I really love about this animation. It tries to be the original, but also doing something new. It's like, how can I say this? It's like the original animation of the X-Men first 4 seasons, because in the 5th one they had to change for a lot of different reasons. But it was the original animation from those 4 seasons combined with something like the animation from Invincible, for say the least. And that is something beautiful to see on a bigger scale. And that's something that we have to attribute to a lot of the people who work on this show, that they wanted to bring something new, something fresh, and something that we can be proud of as X-Men fans. Now, with that being said, what is going to happen now that is going to have more few episodes in the coming weeks? Now, what's it going to happen? Now, there's a lot of things going around. Why the Sentinels came back after all this time? What's the role of Rogue, Magneto, and Gambit? Who is the other Jean? What's gonna happen to Storm? Who is going behind the scenes and trying to bring Jean back after all this time? Is Theo Rossi Deadpool? Is Apocalypse coming back? Is it going to bring the Hellfire Club? Remember, the Hellfire Club is still around. There was supposed to be an episode in which the Hellfire Club is doing a Hellfire Gala from the comics, of course. What's going to happen between Sunspot and Jubilee? Is Wolverine and Beast going to have more stories? Is Wolverine still going around loving Jean? Because remember, Wolverine might love Jean, but he also loves Mariko, Jericho, Sarah, Silver Fox. Wolverine's a horrid moron. Let's just say it. But let's go back to this story. What's gonna happen with Cable now? Remember that Cable is going back also? So is he going to come back to this story? And if so, what's the story about Cyclops? What's he going to do now? Is he going to let Magneto lead the team? Or is he going to do something in which he makes him realize, I need to take over the team? If this show is establishing something about the whole season, is that it's clear that the X-Men are going into split forms. It's going to be broken or separated in some form or capacity. We saw it in different reasons. How is he going to glue them back together? What is going to be the clicking point? And what's he going to do now that he's a father? That's something that I'm looking forward, and that's something that I want to see in the next few episodes. Now, at the time of this video, which hopefully is due to come Wednesday, we don't know many things, but the third episode is about to come, and I promise you, as soon as I saw the video or as soon as I see the third episode, I'll let you know, so stay tuned. So, what do you think of X-Men 1987? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Oh, I forgot something. Yes. Talk about what many people are worried about, and that is that it will become a woke agenda. And I know talking about this is sensible. I don't usually bring that to my videos, but there's something many people are worried, since Disney is also in charge also, is that this show might become woke. Some people say it was always woke, but I'm talking about the woke agenda, you know, make the characters who, like women or people of color, be more important than, you know, people of white, you know, and that's something that many people are worried because it will compromise the equality over an agenda. Am I worried about this? Yes, a little, but this is made by the same people who made the animated series. And all I want from these characters, especially from the ones that I mentioned before, is that they should have more development. Don't just put them aside for the sake of appeasing a group of people or a group of agendas. Just make the show what it is. Make the show cool. Make the show amazing. Don't just worry too much about what people will like or not. Worry about the quality of your show and what stories you can bring, which I'm sure nowadays is hard to do, especially in media, because people want to be included, people want to establish an agenda, and we're going to a point in which we are sickened to death about all of this. But if there's something that I learned from X-Men, is that it's all about uniting. Charles' dream was that mutants and humans can work together and have a peaceful world. And maybe that's something we should take away from these teachings. Maybe make the X-Men not one thing, but a lot of many things for many people, without destroying the old. Without saying, no, this character is a specific person, we're going to change it to this other person so it's becoming more appeasing to other groups. Don't do that. Just keep the characters that you have right now, develop them to a higher levels, bring new interesting stories, and I promise you it will be worth it at the end. And hopefully with the success of X-Men 97, all the shows might be revived. I heard a lot of talks about reviving the original Spider-Man the Animated Series, the one in which it had connections with the X-Men. Although I'm hoping more for Spectacular Spider-Man, because for me it's the one show that needs to be revived since it ended on a cliffhanger, as well as other shows. But hopefully with this one, it could bring something new. And hopefully it will bring Marvel to new heights. That's what I'm hoping. So with that being said, now tell me, what are your thoughts on X-Men 97? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you thought it was meh? Leave the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to this video. So until then, I'm Enrique, and I'll see you next time. Peace.